This is Dante Alighieri, the famed medieval poet known for his Divine Comedy. Or rather, this is an actor playing Dante as he enters through the gates of hell in the first ever film adaptation of the Inferno in the year 1911. Now, Dante didn't invent the idea of a gateway to hell, which long had its roots in mythology, but he did come up with a modern interpretation of it. The Inferno film preserves many of the same visual elements that Dante included in his work from 6 centuries earlier, a work today we might call fantasy, with its surreal landscapes, fantastic creatures, and important symbolism. In the decades following the 1911 film adaptation of the Inferno, the genre of fantasy began to appear widely throughout literature and film. Some of the most beloved fantasy stories came about at this time, including J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings and C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia. Unsurprisingly, these authors turned to past works of fantasy for inspiration, including, you guessed it, Dante's Inferno. And perhaps the most iconic feature of the Inferno, the gateway to hell itself, is the most prevalent reference of all. This carries into the medium of film, and it's especially true when the film enters a symbolic hell, and more often than not, it's Dante's hell they're referring to. And with today's film technology, the visual references when entering hell have only gotten better. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Harry and Dumbledore go to a cave in the side of a cliff in search of a piece of Voldemort's soul. This scene in particular contains many visual references to the Inferno, beginning with the parallels of Harry as Dante and Dumbledore as his guide Virgil. Also important is the presence of water surrounding the cave, a recurring obstacle to overcome that you can see in many depictions of hell. Dante's Hell defines the River Acheron as the official entrance to hell, with more bodies of water inside. Once Harry and Dumbledore find themselves inside the cave, they summon Dante again with the lake that must be crossed by boat, similar to the Acheron in Styx. It's not until after they cross the lake that it takes on more of a Styx persona, with bodies of the dead threatening to drag them under the water. The lake goes on to become more like the Phlegethon after Dumbledore lights it on fire, and thus they are able to exit the cave. Their trip to find the Horcrux, then, could almost be described as a miniature version of Dante's journey through hell. Crossing a body of water to enter hell can be seen again in the movie What Dreams May Come, which follows Robin Williams' character as he attempts to rescue his wife from hell. This is a literal depiction of hell rather than figurative, but it contains many of the same elements as Harry Potter does: crossing by boat, being led by a guide, bodies threatening to drag them in the water. It again brings to mind Dante's experience crossing the river Styx. Once the characters find themselves safely across the water, they find an industrial depiction of hell with more references to the Inferno.
What is this place? It's the gateway to hell.
A number of the same punishments are depicted, including those outside the Acheron who must mindlessly chase the banner, as well as those who must carry heavy weights on their back. In the Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo faces a similar difficulty with getting through his own symbolic gate of hell at the mines of Moria. Led by another Virgil-esque character through Gandalf, Frodo faces similar wariness as Dante before going through the gate, which Gandalf helps to subdue. They find an inscription above the gate, which they must come to understand before being allowed entry, and which also is guarded by water. And yet again, something comes out of the water to try and stop them. Once they enter the subterranean mine, they find it full of dead bodies, bringing to mind the dead souls of the Inferno.
This is no mine. It's a tomb.
And they must descend further to make it out the other side, just like Dante. The same necessary descent into hell can be found in the recent horror movie, As Above, So Below. Here, a group of explorers venture into the Paris catacombs, where they unknowingly pass through the gate of hell. Some of the references to the Inferno might be a bit too literal.
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
But the movie utilizes the same concept of gaining enlightenment as they descend further, ultimately leading the main character to be able to exit once he reaches the bottom. Finally, and perhaps the most symbolic example, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe contains numerous visual references to the Inferno. Hell here is depicted as the frozen castle of the White Witch, surrounded by an equally frozen lake. C.S. Lewis is borrowing Dante's depiction of the ninth circle of hell, which is cast in ice that forms the frozen lake of Cocytus. Rather than place it solely at the center, however, Lewis makes the entirety of the symbolic structure of hell cast in ice, the fitting home for the White Witch, who exists as a parallel to Lucifer, doomed to the frozen lake in the Inferno. The souls within the castle that stand frozen as statues are also a nod toward Cocytus, although they can also be seen as existing in a state of limbo between heaven and hell, same as those souls that Dante first encounters after passing through the gate. The gateway to Dante's Inferno is just one of many symbols from the text that have been carried over the centuries through depictions of hell, but it remains one of the most common. So when there is a journey in a film or in a piece of literature, whether it be to retrieve part of a soul, destroy a ring, or restore land back to its former glory, there's almost always some type of obstruction that a character must venture through to continue onwards. There's almost always a gate to enter.